stick to your guns, have your goals, and, just aim towards your goals and what you want to get.
This is Brendan Gillen from Fight Gear Direct.
This is Andrew Chernlin with Chernlin Products.
This is Dan Kaplan of The Game Steward.
And you're listening to...
And you're listening to...
And you're listening to the E-Comm Show.
Welcome to the E-Comm Show, presented by BlueTuskr, the #1 place to hear the inside scoop from other e-commerce experts, where they share their secrets on how they scaled their business and are now living the dream. Now, here is your host, Andrew Math.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the E-Comm Show. I'm your host, Andrew Math. Today, I am graced with being getting to interview Brendan Gillen of the E-Commerce Factory, Chief E-Commerce Officer. Y'all set? You ready for a good show?
All good.
Awesome. So super excited for this one. So just to give everyone a little bit of insight into kind of how we run the show, I send over a couple things about like what it is they want to talk about. And Brendan mentioned some of my favorite stuff in terms of like following data and not just kind of guessing, which we're totally going to get into. But let's kick it off. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the E-Commerce Factory and, what it is you guys do there. And then we'll kind of, we'll just let this go.
Yeah, too easy. Thanks for having me. So the E-Commerce Factory, we have a mission, and our mission is to make e-commerce simple. So I've been in e-commerce for around 10 years, and it was so complicated. Everything was just really, really hard. Lots of technology and lots of systems, and pulling it all together was always really complicated. And so what we did is we started the E-Commerce Factory so that we could grow brands really easily by just using technology that works and using data to make decisions to grow brands and e-commerce stores.
Nice. Beautiful. So I know you obviously are Chief E-Comm Officer at the E-Commerce Factory. You also have Fight Gear Direct, which was, I believe, one of the first acquisitions you made with the E-Commerce Factory, correct? Yeah,
spot on. Yeah, so we try and find brands that are underperforming, and we acquire them and use, I guess, our expertise to try and grow them into, large, more profitable brands over time.
So what was it about Fight Gear Direct that stood out to you that made you guys want to start there?
Yeah, cool. So when we looked at it, we looked at the numbers and we sort of seen what were the areas that we think we could work on. And what we found was that the person that was running it beforehand, while they were doing an amazing job, there was just some opportunities that they weren't looking at. So we just looked at where the traffic was coming from, where the sales were coming from, and had a look to see whether there was areas that they hadn't sort of grabbed yet.
Cool. The Fight Gear Direct is mostly products based on like MMA stuff and boxing and like almost like anything fighting that's kind of gym related, right?
Yeah, spot on. So we sell all professional level boxing gear and professional level UFC and MMA, and we're starting to move into sort of that home gym and boxing bags and things like that as well as the world starts to train more at home.
Okay. So is this like a passion of yours in any way, or did you guys solely go after numbers only? And like do you have zero interest in like the fighting sports of any kind, or did you just say like, I love this and let's buy this?
Look, when I was young, I did taekwondo, so I do understand martial arts a little bit. But no, I didn't buy it because I love the industry. I guess I have a little bit of knowledge in there, but definitely bought it based on the numbers. We looked at that first, and every time we look at a store, so we probably look at 5 to 10 stores a week now for potential acquisitions. And the niche plays a small part in why we buy it, but it's not the primary part. If we see an opportunity based on the data, we'll just go for it, and that's what we did with Fight Gear.
Okay, so are they all the brands that you guys are acquiring? Are they all different categories and different product lines, or are they all kind of relatively similar?
No, always different. Yep, 100%. So we interestingly looked at one the other day, which were potential purchasing, and it's like nails to get your nails done, which is I have no interest in
Complete
that.
opposite.
Yeah, but it's a growing market, and it's really good profit margins, and there's huge opportunities in that space. So that was another one we're looking at.
Cool. So what made you go in this direction? So like my thought process here is like, I know a lot of sellers that, kind of hit, they'll start creeping up over like 5 million a year, but then they start to like kind of wonder, like, how do I get this to go a little bit faster? And then they start thinking about the whole acquisition approach. And it's interesting how you went a whole different route. You're like, I'm just going to acquire from the beginning. and start buying up brands and do it that way. So what gave you this idea of kind of, acquiring all these different brands?
Yeah, so prior to the e-commerce factory, I worked in brand. So I've always worked for a company we've rarely started a store from scratch. So I've always come in and become head of e-commerce for those brands. So my role has always been to grow existing brands. So it was a real easy transition to say, well, if I was to do this myself, could I go out and build a store? Yeah, I could. But where my skill set is grabbing an existing brand and sort of really leveraging it and amplifying it. So that was where we thought it was. And it's also a much quicker way to do things, because if you build a brand from scratch, you've got a couple of areas you need to think about. You need to do brand awareness. So there's a lot of this element of trying to build the brand up, as well as, build the store up and get the products and do all that sort of stuff. But if you acquire a business, all that's already done for you. And all you need to do is just sort of put a bit more fuel on the fire to make it grow. So it's definitely a quicker way to get to the numbers that you're after.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, it totally makes sense. Let the original guy hash out all the problems. And then once he's done, then buy it from him. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's it.
So what is it you look for in these brands when you start digging into their numbers and stuff? Is there like certain profit margins or certain website traffic or an email list? Like what is it that you guys are kind of look for that's like your sweet spot?
Yeah, spot on. So we look at whether they're operating in demand generation, demand capture channels. So demand capture channels is where usually Google Shopping, or whether it's a large email list, and whether they're whether that's tapped or untapped. So the big one we look at is Google Shopping is probably the biggest one, because we know there is a huge opportunity there that people aren't leveraging. And if we're not using Google Shopping, we jump in that one. Email list is another big one. If they don't have an email list, we know we can really grow the business from there. But in terms of key metrics that we look for something that has a high average order value. So we never really go at stores that are sort of under the $50 average order value. And the reason for that is it's very hard to buy traffic if you don't have a high average order value. So really, I guess if you're hearing through what I'm saying, is we look for areas that we can buy traffic in that we know we can make perform, is really where it is. Yeah.
So with that being your kind of tier, do you ever look at, or do you ever even bother looking at stuff that's below a $50 average order value, but maybe has a longer lifetime value? So if they're a subscriber or something like that, do you ever bother with those, or is that still like, not a fan?
Yeah, look, it is a really good one. It is a lot harder because it's harder to guarantee that there's a longer lifetime value with the subscription model. But yeah, we have looked at that, and actually this nail store that we're looking at has that, because it's reusable. It's a reusable product that you can continue to buy and put a subscription on, and they don't have that yet, so that is an opportunity for that store. But to start with, we're just looking at the high average order value with larger profit margins that have an untapped demand capture resource. Yeah.
Okay. How many brands have you guys acquired so far?
We've only got 2. We've only been running for 8 months, so we're not out to buy lots of stores. So we're not out to buy lots of stores. We want to make sure the ones we do buy grow. And 5 key directors we've already grown sort of what did we do last month? So we're about 800% up on when we first bought it. So the scale we've seen out of that's been immense. So we want to just try and replicate that with the next one we buy. So we're not going to just grab any store and waste our resources on those stores. We're just going to grow ones that we say, well, you know what, if we bought this today and we spent 1 to 2 months on the areas that we think could be exposed, would we see our return on investment? So we want to try and pay our money back within sort of 6 to 12 months. And we can usually forecast whether we're going to do that or not.
There you go. Are you solely focused on e-commerce only, or do some of these brands also have like a retail presence or anything like that?
E-commerce only. Yeah.
And is it like their own website only, or are they also available on marketplaces? What's the approach there?
Yeah, great question. It's actually one of the opportunities we look at as well, whether or not we can put this business on marketplace, because usually that's a really quick win, right? So if a business wants to scale, they might have their direct to consumer business, but if you're hitting the ceiling, like you mentioned before, for some brands, the quickest way to get past that ceiling is to plug into a marketplace. Or plug into another country or something like that. So 100% we do go into marketplaces. Yeah.
Nice. So and I know obviously you're based out of Australia, if it wasn't obvious to all of our listeners. So are you solely focused on Australian brands right now? Are you looking at other places across the globe? What's the approach there?
Yeah, look, predominantly we have been looking at Australian brands because there's not many people doing it over here in this market in the way we look at brands. But in saying that, we've had two brands that fell into our sort of portfolio of looking this week. That one's in Romania and one is out of the US. So we are looking now internationally because Australia's not a very big market. We've only got 26 million people that live here, so it's really small. So trying to tap the pool of people here. You can hit the ceiling pretty quickly. So we are looking now at greater markets just to grow.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So just to kind of to pivot away for a second, I obviously dug in a little bit prior to getting on the call. What is the $1 million store?
Oh, yeah, cool. So when I worked for other brands, what I found was it was actually really all the big brands. So the ones that are sort of doing, 8-9 figures that I worked with versus the smaller stores like, Fight Gear Direct, the model remained the same. The only difference that we seen was the investment was more, right? So if you had an 8 or 9 figure brand, you just spent more on marketing versus the smaller brands, they spend less on marketing, but the model remained the same. So we look at 3 key metrics at the $1 million store, and I'll get into what it is in a second, but we look at, very simply, we look at traffic, conversion rate, and average order value. So what we do at the $1 million store is we work with emerging brands to really capture those 3 metrics and grow their business. So we might look at them and say, well, where are you getting your traffic from? What's your average order value and what's your conversion rate? And if we move all those up at the same time, we can get your store to $1 million a year. And so it's a program we put in place that people jump on board, and it's a coaching program where myself and my team work with these stores to help them grow to $1 million. So we don't do any marketing for them. We don't do any sort of website development. We just help them look in the right direction to grow their store. And so far, it's been really good. We've been running that for about the same time as E-Comm Factory. They launched at a similar time. And we've probably got 4 stores that have now reached that $1 million a year mark from scratch, which has been really awesome.
Wow. Okay. So basically, you acquire all these brands at the E-Comm Factory. You've proven out everything. And then you said, screw it, let's teach people. If we don't want to buy them, let's at least teach them how to do it themselves. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, it's a model that anyone can do, really. Like, it's really straightforward. Yeah.
Genius. I love it. What's the approach? What's the exit strategy? Is there one? All right, is your goal to one day sell off the E-commerce factory, or are you going to retire on it? You giving it to your kids? Like, what's the thought there?
Yeah, look, our goal is to acquire brands and sell them. So really that's where we're at. So we're using Fight Gear to test our theories. So we use that to test everything that we teach in the $1 million store. So if someone comes up and says, hey, we want to do TikTok ads, we're like, oh, well, we're not really 100% sure on TikTok ads. So we'll test it ourselves on our stores and see if it works. And then we'll use that to grow our stores, and then we'll sell. The idea is we sell them off in sort of every 2 to 3 years, and we just continue to build that portfolio of stores. So I don't see the E-commerce factory being sold anytime soon. It's just a holding company that buys and grows e-com stores and sells them off. So that's sort of our model. So while we sell products to our e-com stores, at the end of the day, we effectively buying and selling e-com stores. Is really the best way to put it. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're teaching all these sellers, basically how to break $1 million, plus you're buying all of these companies and breaking $1 million with them, do you have that one piece of advice, or what's the one thing that you always see tends to be that hurdle that sellers struggle to get over that 7-figure mark?
I think that, the biggest struggle is just not knowing your numbers. That is the biggest struggle, really, is that we all get distracted by all the shiny objects. So we need to be doing Facebook marketing, and we need to be doing, TikTok ads, and we need to be doing automations in flows. And all of those are true. But the problem is that everyone wants to try to do that all at once. So the biggest problem is that people don't stick to one lane and really own it. They need to focus on sort of their one lane and know why they're doing each of those things. So we break it up into a couple of key areas. We think of like an e-commerce funnel where we say, okay, what are you doing for awareness of your brand? Then what are you doing to acquire customers? What do you do to convert them? And then what are you doing to keep them? And if we can do all those things, then we can scale our business. So when we think about the $1 million store, what we say is, okay, what activities are you doing in the awareness space? So we look at that and we go, well, that's Facebook advertising. What are you doing in the acquisition phase? Well, that is Google Shopping. What are you doing in the retention space? And that is email marketing. And then conversion is your website optimization. So what we do is we break it up in a really simple way. And we say, okay, guys, for you to get past that mark, you've got to make sure that you're working in all of those and you're measuring each of those individually. So where the problem that people do is they say, well, I just want to do Facebook marketing because that's fun and cool. But really got to be focusing on the stuff that's not always fun and cool, which is, looking at how do we get our customers coming back as opposed to just trying to get new customers and fill the bucket. Because it's a lot cheaper to get existing customers to buy than it is to get new customers to buy. So,
Exactly.
So we just want to make sure that everyone's working through the entire funnel and just keeping people coming back in.
So when you're acquiring these brands or when you're just coaching them, do you find that a lot of them are just spreading themselves too thin across multiple channels?
Yeah, exactly. And because they're spreading themselves so thin, they never do anything really right. Well, they do everything okay, but just not really well. So, if they try Facebook ads and it just doesn't work, they stop doing that and then start doing something else. If that doesn't work, so I'll try, moving into something else. If they can't build the email list, they'll say, well, email doesn't work, and Facebook doesn't work, and nothing's working, where it's just that they haven't given enough time for it to learn and enough time for them to understand what the actual outcome of that activity is going to be. So a great example is Facebook ads. It's a great way to grow your business, a great way to grow your brand. And we've seen that with a lot of e-commerce stores. But it's not necessarily a high converting channel unless you've got deals in there or you've got your only product, whereas people think that that's the only thing to do. So they may not be making sales out of their Facebook ads, but really the way we look at it is you need Facebook and another channel to do those conversions. So one of our strategies is use Facebook to grow the brand and then use Google Shopping or Google Ads to convert the customers because people are actually in demand for your products there.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So obviously in the marketing side, obviously here at BlueTuskr, we get this question all the time of, what should my budget be? Or how much should I be spending on this channel versus this channel? What's a good conversion rate? Like all those very standard questions that are just, can't really give them a real answer for. But how do you decipher when a channel is no longer working for you? And how do you also decipher that, the company that you acquired or the seller that you're helping has spent the appropriate amount and gotten the appropriate amount of data to say that this is no longer working?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So before we start any campaign or paid campaign, we do a return on ad spend calculator. So we look at a customer's typical transaction profile and what that might be. So if someone spends $100 at the top line, so that's the revenue that you make, we have a look and we say, well, how much profit falls out from underneath that? So let's just say after all costs of goods and your fees and your delivery and all that sort of thing, they get $30. What we say is we've actually only got $30 to spend on marketing, and we need to work our return on ad spend on that $30, not on the $100. Okay. So we look at that and we build a return on ad spend based on the $30. And if we do that, then we can look at the marketing channels and say, well, what's our return on ad spend out of those marketing channels? Now, different marketing channels, and you definitely know this at BlueTuskr, is you don't always get the same return on ad spend out of Facebook than you would with Google ads. So what we do is we say, if we blend or average out the return on ad spend of those two channels, we want that to equal the return on ad spend of our profit return on ad spend. Is that making sense?
I actually, it makes sense to me, and I really appreciate it because it's the same. It's the same thing we say. So usually, what we'll do is, we'll run ads. Let's say we're on multiple channels, so we're running ads on Facebook and Google and Snapchat and TikTok, and you're on all these different channels. And sometimes, you'll look at one and your ROI might be significantly lower than what you wanted it to be. And then you look at Google, which is obviously more middle of the funnel, and it's a little bit higher than what you would expect. But at the end of the day, at least to us, the shopper's journey for most brands is so fluid. They could see your ad on Facebook and then Google you and click your ad on Google and both take credit. And so they're both, now the numbers are inflated and it looks ridiculous. So usually what we'll do is we'll take all the channels and all of the ad spend and then just look at the total revenue for whatever time frame we're looking at and go, here's what you spent, here's what you got. Now, if we want to figure out where else we should be spending budget, now I'm going to look into each channel and kind of make a judgment. But you really need to know that channel to make a judgment on it, because your ROI target, at least again, in my opinion, is on Facebook should be wildly different than what it is on Google just because of the way that someone shops. Plus, you got to factor in your cost per click and your average order value from a Facebook ad versus a Google ad. And, obviously that kind of stuff can differentiate it as well. But is that essentially the same approach you're taking?
100% the same approach, yeah. What we spend and what comes in is exactly, you have to look at it all in one thing, because you need all the channels, right? You need to be surrounding your customer with your brand and your products at all times, because they're at different parts of their buying journey, right? So if you said every channel needs to have the same return on ad spend, you're never going to do any good. Because like you said, Facebook and Google have completely different ROAS numbers that we need to work on. So yeah, 100% completely agree.
So now let's flip it upside down. What are you doing on the retention side? So once they've converted, they are now a customer. What are your typical approaches on getting them to come back?
Yeah, we're really big on email automation, and we use Klaviyo for pretty much all of our stores. And we use that a whole heap of automation. So the normal ones are people that don't buy will do cart abandonment. We do a lot of win-back campaigns. So people that haven't purchased in a certain period of time, we'll prod them with emails. We do a lot of nurturing with ongoing campaigns, but really our retention side is all about email marketing and keeping in contact with the customer. So we see email marketing a little bit like advertising in Facebook. Even though they might not be ready to buy, it's important to continue to send them emails because it keeps your brand front of mind. I don't know if your inbox is anything like mine, but I just see brands emailing me all day, every day. Yeah. So if I'm not constantly emailing my customers, they'll never see my brand in their inbox, right? Because if I email, then other brands are going to come in and it's going to go down the inbox. So our goal is to continually put our brand in front of people, and then occasionally, try and throw the hook in to pull a fish out with some sort of offer. So we use email automation with Klaviyo most of the time to get people to come back.
Okay. How often are you emailing them?
At least twice a week from a campaign perspective. They may get a flow in as well occasionally during there. So they could in any one week get 2 to 3 emails on minimum. If we're in a sale period like a Black Friday, we might be emailing 2 to 3 times a day. And that's purely just to get the inbox visibility during those periods.
So what are you doing to keep your spam rate or your unsubscribe rate from getting out of hand with emailing that often?
Yeah, so personalization is key for us. So we're continually going to enrich like the first party data. So we're doing a lot of work around getting people to fill out more preferences for them. So we run a competition every month, and it's, spend $100 to win a gift card. Enter some more details to win a $100 gift card with our brands. And what that does is, so Fike is a great example, is we'll send out a competition email, or we'll do a competition on Facebook, and we'll say, enter the sport you're interested in and tell us a little bit more about yourself to go into the draw to win a $100 gift card. That allows us to enrich the data in Klaviyo so that when we send emails, that's a lot more relevant to what they want, and they're more likely to open it. But it's interesting, even though the more emails we send, we're not actually seeing an increase in unsub rates. I haven't actually come across that yet, especially during the Black Friday periods. It sounds like 3 emails a day is a lot, but we've tested it in both our brands as well as brands that I worked for. And the more emails you send during key sale periods, you just make more money. Like, it's really interesting, and you actually just don't lose people because they expect to see emails during that time.
So you leverage email a pretty good amount. So I would imagine you probably have some kind of system set up where you're trying to gather email addresses even if they didn't purchase, correct?
Yes, exactly right.
So what's that look like?
Yes, we do two strategies there. One is the on page. So we do our normal fly out or pop up, it gives a voucher for someone to sign up in most cases. The other one is we're using Facebook quite heavily for lead generation. So we set up a number of lead ads, and we just have them evergreen filling up the pool there. And that is the gift card competition. So we just say, leave your email address here to win $100 at our store. And that's just a way that we just continue to fill up our email list, and it works really well.
Nice.
Yeah.
On the post-purchase side, have you tried anything on like the whole community building aspect of things? Like, or have you considered, like, let's say for Fike Direct specifically, have you considered like post-purchase inviting them to join some kind of Facebook group or Slack workspace thing, or, you know, LinkedIn if it was a B2B or anything like that? Have you tried or thought of anything to kind of centralize the community that you're building?
No, I haven't, but there's been a lot of talk about that currently in the e-com space around, you know, how do we take people out of email or, you know, complement email with a community? No, we haven't, but in terms of the post-purchase, what we do is we do personalized thank you emails. So they come from the CEO of the company, or they come from me. So basically, if you buy from me, you'll get a email that says, "Hey, Andrew, thanks so much for buying. Just wanted to let you know, I'm the big cheese here at Fikia, and I just wanted to say thanks for your order. It means a lot to us." And that's all we say. And it's a plain text email that goes out. And the amount of replies we get to that is phenomenal. It's really, really good. And they're like, "I can't believe you've emailed me, you know, that you've gone out of your day to do that." And obviously it's automated out of Klaviyo. And it's been really good. And what that does is if people reply to a marketing email, it helps put them in a higher visibility in your inbox. So Klaviyo gets the signals that people are replying to your emails, and you get a lot more visibility. So we're finding we get a lot more cut through just by having those thank you emails.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of those, that like new customer email from the CEO kind of thing. And it, make it look like he wrote it or she, and it obviously, like, those things work so well. I imagine you probably do the same on like a repeat customer, because I know Klaviyo prepares that stuff for you. So it's, if you don't have it, but you have Klaviyo, I'm always like, how did you not set that up? Like they prepared it for you to just fill it out. They're like, nope, we skipped it. Like, okay. What about on a social side? Like, do you guys do anything for, user generated content, getting them to submit pictures of them like wearing their fight gear or anything like that?
We don't. And, it's an opportunity that I think we could expose. And that's probably one of the drawbacks of being in an industry that you don't understand the niche really well. So as much as I understand boxing and fighting, and I don't go to the boxing gym and I don't do things like that. So I've got nowhere I can take photos of myself boxing. We could encourage people. We just haven't really leveraged that, but I can see there's an opportunity there, and it's something we could do. But because we don't physically hold the product or do anything with the product, it makes it really hard to go and do stuff like that.
That was actually good segue, because that was my next question, was how does that work on an acquisition side? So A, the person that you acquired the company from, are they still working there? And then B, on like a fulfillment side, do you just leave it as is, or do you bring everything into one warehouse? What's the approach there?
Yeah, so no, the person that we've acquired it from, they're no longer in the business. We use a team of virtual assistants predominantly. We actually, it's sort of like it's a semi dropship model that we use. So we do ship direct from our suppliers, but we also do hold stock in our warehouse as well. So because we have such a wide variety of equipment, we have large boxing bags and small boxing gloves. The shipping profile of that is really vast. So it can cost a lot. And in shipping it around Australia is really expensive. So if you think about Australia, we have an East Coast and a West Coast like you guys do. But in between is just a big desert. So if we live on the East Coast and we want to ship to the West Coast, and it's I'm going to use kilos, I know you guys use pounds, but it's a 60 kilo bag, that's going to cost us a lot of money to get it from one side of Australia to the other. So we need to leverage our, we don't have warehouses all over the country. We're not that fortunate. So we need to use the warehousing of the company that makes the product. So we ship directly from our suppliers for large products, but we keep the other products in our warehouse. But most of our business is run from virtual assistants, which has been really, really powerful. So we leverage those for customer service, some fulfillment, with the fulfillment from the suppliers. We use them now for advertising. So a lot of our business is virtual, and it's a team that we can just plug another brand into, and the model remains the same.
So let's touch on that virtual assistant thing for a second here. So years ago, I was in-house somewhere, and this guy was so proud of himself because he didn't even, so as the CEO of the company, it was a $10 million a year company, and it was just him who was he was busy running a different company. And then it was myself and one other person full-time, and then everyone else was virtual. And he was a big fan of being able to have a $10 million company with only 2 actual employees. What is your approach on VAs? A, is that your goal? And then B, how are you finding them and vetting them? What's your approach there?
Yeah, so my view on VAs has really shifted. So a couple of years ago, I would be like, I'm never doing that because how do you maintain quality and consistency? But now that's changed. So we use VAs for the repetitive, easily teachable tasks. So things like where we have to ship items from our suppliers. That's a really easy one, right? So we've automated a lot of those orders that if you buy a certain product, it just sends an email off to that supplier to ship it. And what the VA does is they just monitor that from shipment to fulfillment to make sure it goes through. From a customer service perspective, we're using Gorgeous, which is a customer service platform that plugs nicely into Shopify. And we have a whole heap of predefined templates and processes that our VAs use there. So that's a really easy way to do it. And then the third one is the way we hire the VAs is a little different to the way we might have done it in the past. So in the past, we might have used places like your Freelancer or Upwork or a few of those sort of crowdsourcing communities. But what we found was that the VAs there were spread across multiple brands and you never really got a dedicated VA for your brand. So we're now hiring off onlinejobs.ph. So predominantly our VAs are in Philippines for some of those tasks. We find the quality is really good and they've got a lot of experience now because they've been doing it for so long. And e-commerce is a really strong suit of theirs. So for customer service and fulfillment, we use Filipino VAs. But in terms of other parts, we use some Australian virtual assistants as well for sort of more that, face-to-face phone calls and things like that. But we find them really good. So using online jobs, it's like hiring our own staff member. And we treat them now like staff members. I get photos from my VAs that they're on the beach with their kids, and they're having a great time and they just want to say thanks. Because you really are helping these guys change their lives. So for us, it might feel like it's, really cost-effective stuff. But at the end of the day, you're actually providing them a really good lifestyle and a really good job, and they love it, and they're really loyal, and they learn really well as well, and they're just part of the team now. It's just like we have an office in the Philippines. That's really how we think about it.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I started in e-commerce and marketing almost 15 years ago now, and about 8 years ago is when I started hearing about people outsourcing overseas and just repetitive admin work. And it was amazing. Even then, all the way up to now, almost everyone either hires someone in the Philippines or in the country that they're working out of. I rarely hear any other country. Obviously, we have a handful of VAs we work with. All of our clients, I know that whenever I have to speak with their VAs, most of them are in the Philippines. At this point, it's almost like they might even know each other because of how many of them are all working out of there. It's just amazing how great it is. And I completely agree because to me, there's very little cultural differences, but the benefit, obviously, working out of the States, working out of Australia, or any country, is that working with the Philippines, to me, there's no cultural difference. However, I can pay them well and they can live amazing there, to the point where even I'm kind of like, maybe I should relocate and go live in the Philippines, because if I could live, it'd be great. Sorry, I know I went off on a rant there.
No, I love it.
I was thinking though, so I wanted, after I went through the concept of how you were kind of approaching the funnel and everything, you were doing big on email and a lot of emailing and trying to show up, obviously, during Black Friday, which is always a nightmare. Do you do anything on the SMS side? Do you do anything with text messaging or Facebook Messenger or anything like that?
Yeah, we're doing a lot around text messaging now. So we're not fortunate enough in Australia to have an SMS through Klaviyo. They don't have it here. So we have to use some other tools, but that's okay. So we're using SMS now for our cart abandonment flows, which has been really powerful. So that's a nice little kicker for people is, if someone abandons the cart, but they're opening other emails, we do send them an SMS saying, we've still got this item in your cart. That's working really well. We only send texts out now for promotions though. So we won't be doing texts, like if we're doing 2 emails a week, we're not going to be sending 2 texts a week. We'll only send a text out when it's something that we know the person's interested in, because we know their information and we know that it's a good deal. We'd never just go and send 10 texts a week because it's very personal. You don't want to be invading people's phones too often. So you want to make sure that when they do get the text, that it's something that they want and something that they're going to, take advantage of. Yeah,
I agree. I know sellers who have apps or something like that, push notifications, text messages, you got to be really careful with them because you can get a real bad reputation fast. And I don't know the rules actually behind, because I've never sent that many text messages to the point where I got spammed or something, but I would be really worried about just getting kicked off of whatever platform I'm on from abusing the hell out of that. But so all these brands you're acquiring, do you end up like kind of looking into other brands and like, obviously I'm sure you're doing some competitive analysis, but do you actually look at certain brands that you kind of aspire to turn your brands into?
No, look, and we don't, because we don't want to compare ourselves to others. We just want to run our own race, because I think if you try and compare yourself to other people, you don't know why they made that decision of what they did and whether or not it works, right? Because you can't see underneath the hood on what's happening. So no, we don't. We look to see how we're competing against them. So, we might say in our niche, we might have 2 or 3 businesses that, might be ranking better and it might look like they're doing better than us. We just have a few goals. We go, okay, well, if we're looking for keyword rankings as an example, we want to rank for these keywords above this brand. Might be the only type of comparison we do. But we don't look at them and say, oh, well, they're doing this on their store or they're doing this sort of email, so we have to do it too. We might take inspiration from them, but really we just run our own race, because we don't, similar to what I said, we don't want to get distracted by the shiny objects, distracted by what competitors are doing. And I know from working in global brands that sometimes the decisions that are made of changes in marketing and strategy have not always been for a reason that we think is positive, right? Sometimes it might be a board come along and say, you know what, we need this widget on the website because my friend owns the company, so please put it on the website, even though it makes no money. So you just don't know why brands are doing the things they're doing and whether they work. So my view is, keep an eye on them, but don't have that be your decision maker for what you do with your business. Stick to your guns, have your goals, and just aim towards your goals and what you want to get.
It's so nice to hear someone say that because usually you think like, oh, like, okay, let's use Fight Gear Direct as an example. You're in the fighting category. We're watching so-and-so, like they're like living next to me. Like I want to know exactly what they're doing at all times and blah, blah. But I have the same feeling where I've seen, we'll work with someone and then we'll ask them like, who do you keep an eye on? They'll give us like, we want to beat these guys. And then we'll look at what they're doing and like, okay, they might have more sales, maybe because they are been around longer. Maybe, they're specifically like Google ads and stuff, they're pretty honed in on it. But when you look at like social and things like that, it's like, are you sure this is what you want to copy? Because they're so adamant in wanting to be where that person is that they're not thinking about what can they do to get past them. And by just copying all the time, I feel like you're not differentiating yourself. You're not standing out. So it's great to hear someone say, I don't really care.
Yeah. And I guess the question is for those guys, for you, Andrew, is how do you know that you aren't beating them already?
Good point.
You don't know, right? You don't know. How do you know where they are? And how do you know they're not looking at you and saying the same thing? So it's because you can't see what they're doing, or you can see what they're doing socially in marketing, but is that working for them, and are they actually winning, or are they unprofitable and losing money? So I think it's so hard to find out whether or not you are beating a brand, I guess.
Yeah. And, we'll find people all the time and we'll say like, oh, I have this software that tells me what they're spending in Facebook ads. And like, no, you don't. Like you don't. Like, I promise you don't. Like, to give an example. So like we're SEMrush partners. We use SEMrush all the time for a lot of stuff. Great for SEO. They have some reporting on a paid ad side, but they'll tell you like what they think that someone is spending. And, as an agency, we have the benefit of having access to that stuff. And I'll just look at our own sites and be like, what do you think we're spending? And then I'll look and be like, that's not even close. Like, what? So the people who think that, they have these numbers of, I know what so-and-so does every year and blah, blah, blah. Like, you don't. You absolutely don't. Unless you ask them and they actually tell you the truth, which is unlikely.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
So so you obviously are acquiring brands, but you're also running a couple of them right now. So you personally, what is your day-to-day like? Do you spend most of your time looking at brands to acquire, or do you spend most of your time currently working on the brands that you have acquired?
Yeah, it's a good question. I often ask myself every day, like, am I doing the right thing to get the outcome that I want? To be honest, the brands that we buy, I try and be relatively hands off, and so I think of myself a little bit like a conductor, and I just want to make sure that all the people in the orchestra are doing the right job so that we're working in harmony. So I just make sure so I open a report every morning that has all the key metrics that I want to look at, and I just want to make sure that that's moving in the right direction. So my goal is to basically just have every month better than the last. So I want to make sure that we're growing month on month for each of the brands. So I just look at the numbers, and if there's anything that needs to be done, I'll reach out to the respective person to say, what are we doing this week to move the needle on that number? So my day looks like that. I look at reporting, talk to the brands and say, can we work on this? And then the other side of it is building the $1 million store and making sure that, the people in that group are getting supported with our coaches. That's probably the part of it. And then I look at future proofing. So I say, well, what strategies are out there that we could test? So I mentioned TikTok advertising. That's a space that I'm not familiar with that I think is going to be really interesting moving forward. So that's something we're investigating this month. But yeah, we're always looking at brands each day as well. So basically, my morning is setting up to making sure that we're on track, and then I look to make sure that the coaching business is going well, and then I look at what a new opportunity is, and whether that be marketing strategies or brands is sort of how my day looks.
Interesting. That's pretty cool. Hey, you got a different day every day, it sounds like.
Yeah. And then sometimes when I open the report, it's not looking very good, right? So
and then what you're doing.
Then my day gets thrown out really quickly because it's like, okay, we're now going into crisis mode, and what do we need to do? And I do look at reporting every day, but it's probably a good insight for listeners is don't react every day if you have a bad day. We only react if we have a bad week or we see a trend that's not changing. But if I look at my numbers from today versus yesterday, and there's it's lower, I'm not going to lose it. I'm just going to make sure that we've got the right plan in place for the rest of the week to sort of bring my numbers back. So the key is don't overanalyze your data. Just look at it regularly and know that it's moving in the right direction. And if you need to make changes, make them after, seeing a trend decline.
I completely agree. I always preach 1 could be an anomaly, 2 could be a coincidence, 3 is a trend. So whether it's 1 day or 2 days or 3 weeks or however you're looking at it, I usually try to do that approach of like, don't jump the gun and just assume that, oh no, it broke. Like it could just be a bad day. But look, I obviously really appreciate having you on the show. I don't want to take up too much of your time. So I would love it if you can kind of just let everyone know where they can find more information about really everything that you're doing right now.
Yeah, cool, man. So you can find me on Facebook. Just look for me, Brendan Gillen. I'm on LinkedIn, same name. I have the same name across all platforms because I am the same person. And the e-commerce factory, it's .com.au for those playing overseas. And then the $1,000,000store.co is our coaching business. So that's where you can find me. Always happy to have a chat with people if they have any questions. Just DM me and I'm happy to help.
Cool. Of course, appreciate having you on the show, Brendan. Again, thank you to all the listeners who turned in. Make sure you head over to ecommshow.com and subscribe to the podcast, really wherever you want, any podcast platform on our YouTube channel, anything like that. But as usual, until next time, keep selling and good luck out there.
Thank you for tuning in to the E-Comm Show. Head over to ecommshow.com to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or on the BlueTuskr YouTube channel. The E-Comm Show is brought to you by BlueTuskr, a full-service digital marketing company specifically for e-commerce sellers looking to accelerate their growth. Go to BlueTuskr.com now for more information. Make sure to tune in next week for another amazing episode of the E-Comm Show.